Step closer. I won't bite. Come here. Come here. Hey, you there. Non Rita. Spare a moment, will you?
The Forlorn Swords, or the final stretch, concluded Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon. It's easily one of the worst sections of the game, bar none. I'm rather surprised they decided to release it in the way that they have. By the way, I'm Anthony. So in this video, I'll be exploring what makes Act 3 rather incomplete, as I've noticed many complaints of such via Steam reviews, yet also many others who don't seem to take issue with what is essentially so unsatisfying a finale. I'm genuinely confused and very much disappointed after enjoying my initial 45 hours or so in Acts 1 and 2. I would have rather them delay the release for a few more months or however long to polish it, but since it's no longer an early access title, then it deserves whatever criticisms as the full intended experience. Also, if it isn't obvious, there will be spoilers, so beware. You've been warned. To make it clear, I've beaten the game as of the 1.03 update, and as I'm staring at the latest patch 1.07a, it doesn't really address any of my complaints, so the criticisms I have are still valid. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like the game a lot, but I think it'll become obvious that the developers didn't have enough time to finish for 1.0. The overall level of quality and scope of what made the first and second areas of the game great, or at least intriguing in what it applies, doesn't live up to the expectations at all. Act 3 needs a lot more than simply what the developers know in their roadmap as extra content. I think it would have been wiser if they fixed or altered what exists first. Instead, what is noted in the roadmap is the following. A huge batch of extra content is coming in patch 1.1, which will include many of the most popular community requests, especially in the Forlorn Swords Act 3 region. I'm also rather surprised that so many Steam reviews can give the last area a pass, given that the overall percentage of reviews about 50 hours or so in, and higher, still demonstrate a positive outlook, roughly 87% or so, recent and overall. However, not many people have made it to the end overall or interacted with Act 3 if global achievement percentages are to be believed. So what's wrong? I'll break it down roughly. Firstly, the map and its design issues. Secondly, combat, weapons and loot. Third, voices and dialogue. Fourth, main quest scenario. And fifth, major follow-up side quest. So to roughly break down the events that occur in the Forlorn Swords, you, the player, are here to retrieve the last of King Arthur's fragments. The area itself is already an issue. You are specifically traveling to the Del Rita's exile zone, a harsh wintry environment for those who do not accept Camelot's rule. Therefore, the story itself already implies generally that you will likely not meet or interact in ways involving a wider scope, such as with the Camelosians or the rest of Avalon. There was an implied Camelot attack on the Gunvolt tribe recently, who are now mostly wiped out to keep the Del Rita tribes in check so they won't band together and or call upon the fearsome giants. Yet, like many events in the game, these are implied and occur before the player. You don't get to experience the profound or interesting events that occurred already, which doesn't feel great at what is the finale where you naturally expect the climax and huge events to directly unfold. Where is the interest in the present then? So instead, you'll be mainly interacting with the Del Rita tribes and their wolves that make up the map. For the finale, the developers decided that for whatever reason, the wide and interesting things associated with the worldly affairs of the rest of the game doesn't really continue, save for some quests that just so happen to involve Map 3 for some side quest continuation, but more on those later. Let's start out with examining how and what elements of the play area can be defined. Foremost, the map is closer to the size of Map 1, the Horns of the South, than Connacht. How is it that they regress for what is the climax? Map 3 definitely should be bigger or at least impressive in a way that matches or super exceeds the experience of Connacht at the minimum, you'd think. And the inability of Map 3 to do so already seems questionable. You could define the play area further by the division based on the 4 tribes you will be interacting with. The Volker, the Sven, the Ulfer, and the Duids, as the map can be mainly broken down into 4 subzones which serve as the relevant story and side content related to that particular tribe. A major complaint I have is that the content surrounding these areas serve no real purpose other than filler rather than environmental or deeper storytelling. Call it backyard questing by their proximity and purpose. There are parts that are not associated with it, but most of your experience of the map is concentrated in these tribe areas. There will be extremely few side quests that do not involve a tribe NPC that is having issues based on their main story tribe predicament. There are also way less characters, visible NPCs, and overall scope of complexity of questing that you may have liked from Acts 1 and 2. You might have noticed it by now, but 90% of the map is snow, and this already demonstrates to me that there isn't much going on just from a glance. So it isn't that in itself snow maps are intrinsically bad or uninteresting, but the way it is implemented here is to clearly save on time and resources. The snow map here implicitly lacks detail. It is simply white with really poor quality textures and lacking any sort of vegetation or interesting elements other than initial greenery, bodies of water, and large stored structures. The copy-paste assets, which didn't bother me prior, now do, as the amount of unique assets are definitely lower than Acts 1 and 2. If the developers are saving time here, surely they compensate in other ways, yes? Arguably, no, given what I'll be describing. Take a good look at how some of the other two maps depict overall intended mood, such as Horn's Spooky Cemetery or Quinnock's Marsh area. It really sells the experience immediately and is distinctively memorable. The overall level of detail of the snow itself is really poor for what is repeated textures and mounds used to a massive degree. The result is that the artistry of the area doesn't feel complete. I can't say I remember many locales in Act 3. Note how there are things that oddly clip into each other or feel incomplete spatially. Perhaps it doesn't matter to some of you, but if everything else already feels like a downgrade, this just adds more to the idea that the Forlorn Swords wasn't and still isn't ready. Also, this is one of the weakest snow effects I've ever seen in a video game to date. Another downgrade are the caves and dungeons. So I don't think that most of the dungeons in the game are complex overall, save something like the Forgotten Ruins in Quinnock. Caves in particular are supposed to be bite-sized mini-adventures, but all instance areas in Map 3 are extremely short and devoid of any interesting elements. I kid you not, most maps or instance areas in the Forlorn Swords takes roughly 2 to 4 minutes at best to clear, as they're often single-file sorts of situations with hardly any branching paths or unique detours to make the exploration feel satisfying or worth your time. It is jarring to see one of the side quests involving the Volker tribe notes that this NPC would try to reach his wife, who avoids him in a particular mine, but sheer complexity and danger within of getting lost deters him. Yet upon looking at the layout, you'll discover there are simply two paths in which the initial right is blocked and you must navigate the whole of the left side of the tunnel to wrap around. Specified contextualization that doesn't live up to what is stated is a major issue overall. All of this is to say, all the elements are strategically hinted at and designed specifically, be it lore-wise and in-game, in a way to tailor an experience that essentially writes itself out as a pretext to explain the lack of engaging elements and therefore your interest. Whatever made the Horns of the South and Quinnock engaging in roleplay or choice design doesn't really apply here, as they've essentially retconned what you can experience as you reach this insulated area, which is alright in itself, but may be contentious for people expecting the game at this point to push out its boundaries. But they also forgot to make the game interesting for Act 3 that makes the whole experience feel regressive. This is my biggest argument point. One way the game does this is that you explicitly learn the purpose of why you were brought out of the Prologue's Island by the end of Quinnock, or implicitly if you found the Weaver's Chambers in Acts 1 and 2, and this creates issues in designing the story scenario at this point. The question I'm sure the developers had at this point was, how do we make the story interesting at this point of the game? When you receive the shield fragment by the end of Act 2, you are given an optional quest in which you can explore a Druidic tower that was otherwise inaccessible prior. From the various documents left there, you learn that your predetermined purpose is to be a vessel in which King Arthur's resurrection failures can be minimalized, which also include those caused by splitting Arthur's soul into 3 pieces that have a good chance of reviving properly. Yet individually, these fragments cannot perform the duties expected in the different contexts of a ruler. Who you are, and your relevance to the story is noted too early then, as the story really doesn't go further past Act 2, which makes the Forlorn Swords more of a pit stop to the fragment rather than an engaging experience narratively. So the big question is, should you even bother to care about the Del Rita? As the Forlorn Swords is almost exclusively about them, this might be an issue for some, and the reception they've given you in Acts 1 and 2 demonstrates they are pretty generic Norse mythology type peoples, perhaps unique in their tribal affiliations, but ultimately just a bunch of hardy people that are more similar than not. Well, the game hints at their marginalization throughout Acts 1 and 2 with rather unfavorable or, at best, neutral associations against them, so their perspective should be interesting to hear. However, you only discover the whole magnitude of their significance when you finally obtain the last of Arthur's fragments. But really, if you were meant to show both sides of an issue to force a choice, why wasn't this presented at the beginning or middle, and not at the end to make their side worth believing in? But yeah, the game's attempt to see the other side of what's going on kinda fails, as the races, groups, or however the division of rational-minded beings of this game's story doesn't use the diversification of Fays, Picts, Druids, Bondrui, as they are mostly non-existent given their lore-implied rarity, or removal from Avalon. The game overall really only dealt with Avalon natives, Camelosians, and the Del Rita, so almost exclusively the Del Rita left then.
They fought for your name and under your banners. Does this mean you're not fit to be a king?
Okay, but what if you're okay with being checked out of the narrative experience and don't care about it too much? Well, if you're in for the combat and loot, well, bad news here too. So unfortunately, alongside with the later half of Quinnock, there's practically nothing stopping you, as you'll likely be the strongest thing imaginable the moment you step into the Forlorn Swords. And also, I know I just said if you don't care about the story, but it's really hard to take anything seriously considering the weirdness if things just fall over in a few hits. Unfortunately, this game takes a page out of generic game difficulty, as the only real difference you experience is that enemies have higher HP and they hit harder. So if you say, well, you can just turn up the difficulty then, but that only really affects those two parameters again. The fundamental problem of the game's combat is that it stays mechanically stagnant. You will be doing the same things as you have done previously, as the ways you engage in combat does not evolve from the considerations required from Act 1. The real issue is that regardless if you bump up the difficulty or not, whatever AI model behaviors they use for enemies operates roughly the same across different enemy types. They have melee and range options, will use them based on proximity to the player. I actually accidentally entered the final dungeon area prior to starting any of the tribe quests, and I didn't have much issue with one of the infamous Four Dwellers, who are fabled as what is essentially the hardest content of the game. But regardless, my main concern is that the AI functions the exact same way you expect them to since the Horns of the South. They will not react any differently to how players engage with them and can be fought in the same exact ways you approach any other enemy, thereby passing difficulty altogether. Arguably, this is the most copy-paste type element of the game that really hurts the experience, and seeing it unchanged by Act 3 really sours the enjoyment, as you've been fighting the same exact enemies since Act 1 essentially. There are effectively zero, yes really, zero, functionally new enemies in Act 3's main story until the very last dungeon of the game. But speaking of enemies too, this game has a lot of repeated enemies, which really tells you the troubled development of this area, as you likely see the same exact mobs or the same ones with a minor different aesthetic touch-up, but with zero changes to their attack boost set or behaviors. There are sparingly few new enemies as well, but these shared attacks can be largely described as it's this enemy but with new visuals, as they share the same skeleton model alongside precisely how the original moves and attacks with one or two more additions generally. The combat is entirely unenjoyable at this point really, as stamina reduction skills are specable way too early in melee skill trees, and criticals that seem to guarantee staggers will leave enemies open to attacks with minimal effort. So with the 1.04 update, they addressed a major issue in which identifiable items now feature weapons and loot that is appropriate to the Forlorn Sword's difficulty, because they didn't add it in time with the release. Fortunately, I experienced the whole last third of the game with the 1.03 update, so I won't be bothered to examine what those might entail, and frankly, if I wasn't having issues with how much damage I was dealing back then, there isn't a point in engaging with the whole nighttime unidentified loot mechanic anyhow. Naturally, with enemies hitting and scaling more relative to your gear, your equipment should too, but that's all there is to it, as most enemies don't have any new or interesting mechanics that make them more difficult to deal with other than being a numbers game. This same lack of creativity also applies to the effects found on unique equipment, at least for the way I played, so at least for melee and bow options. It's more or less Quinnock levels of equipment on average, just maybe higher values for effects such as critical hit rate, physical damage bonus, or application of X element. Truly unique equipment is far and few between. If you weren't previously impressed with how this game handles gear, you won't be here either. Furthermore, without identifiable items for 1.03 and prior, the loot economy is seriously messed up. There are many merchants on the map, and you'd be surprised that only one of the 4 tribes doesn't at least have one, and the rest are inconveniently close to tribal locations or not at all. The merchants take a backseat here too, as there are less items to buy, and less unique items overall. And combined with a lesser valued enemy loot than Quinnock's, this is with an 8 practicality stat by the way for 100% of the sell value, I really have to ask what they're doing with this aspect of the game. So the only things worth selling from normal drops are reflex bowls and remore bowls. You might notice a trend overall. Bowls are the best sellable value to weight ratio items in the game. These are relatively sparse however, so you'll earn less on average compared to Quinnock for looting enemies. Finally, a small yet extremely important point is that loot from chests doesn't scale well after Quinnock, or after any part of the game really, which in itself was terrible relative to the cost of buying vendor items. There's a minimal increase in how much gold and the type of items you gain from chest boxes since Act 1. Pretty much the same sort of expected loot is rehashed here too. Exploring and finding things often doesn't yield much in return from what I played.
I guarantee my...
Oh, and one more thing. You've proven yourself trustworthy, so you'll find a few special items in my shop now. Perhaps something will catch your interest? Hope you'll find something.
And I do like songs, but just listening at the window of a tavern is much less of a hassle.
If you need something, speak. Watch.
So as with the post-launch updates, and especially now with the 1.05 one, I'm less inclined to talk about the audio experience of the game, given that we're working hard in this regard to make sure that missing audio, subtitles not matching voice content, and the like are being rapidly addressed. But even given all this, the overall quality and script has been going downhill since the first act in my experience, with important stuff still missing, such as Durk's voice lines are being completely missing. He's supposed to be a major highlight fight, and is even in the release trailer, or even missing audio for a segment Arthur's third fragment clairvoyance. I don't know if Durgiv is supposed to have a voice or not, but if he doesn't, well, that's quite the cop-out if it's for lore reasons, given that even the giants have voices. But the most important point is that they have not addressed the overall quality assurance of voice work, and this is easily demonstrated by the pronunciation of Del Rita. For a game that is designed primarily based on a narrative-driven experience, the quality assurance simply isn't there. Listen to some ways in which Del Rita is spoken, and I myself am not sure if I'm pronouncing it properly, but I use Arthur's pronunciation as my reference.
For the Del Rita.
Non Rita. Non Rita. Non Rita. Dal Ritek. Dal Ritek. Dal Ritek.
The Del Rita. The Del Rita.
Del Rita. Del Rita. Del Rita. Del Rita.
Dalriata. 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 Dalriata trappers.
I have a listen to the three giants, who are beings of incredible power, capable of overthrowing Camelot. Lore-wise, they can seemingly break nature's conventions, and are greater than life itself.
Who dares disturb the silence of the stone? My essence lingers, bound to the stone and the world it once shaped.
You expect them to be more imposing, given that the hardy Del Rita denote their fear, respect, and otherworldliness of the giants. It was difficult to take any of this seriously. They just sound cartoonishly old, not wise. Their dialogue options themselves are a repeat, as well as their response structure. Unfortunately, stuff like this is far less likely to be fixed, as it would need to be re-recorded, but it especially bugs me as the lack of QA also applies to unvoiced, or dialogue box options being rather hastily placed, especially in Act 3. I don't necessarily have a direct example here, but I'll describe how it is. You know, those dialogue box options that are supposed to expand or clarify, but do not advance the step or chain of speech, as with Bethesda RPGs. Usually, this option will be under the primary choice, or noted in a way that implies a question or additional information is required. What do you mean? Type of player responses. Sometimes, these options are atop of the advancing dialogue, and sometimes they follow the previous expected conventions. Usually, advancing dialogue or making choices is denoted in orange in this game, but I've had moments where choices don't bother with it, which white text will advance the dialogue anyhow when I wanted to pick more lore or seemingly I want more info choices. Frustrating if you want to hear or examine all that is said, yet you don't want to reload your save.
That's almost a miracle, but now they have left Gunvelder in its time of need. and they're ashamed. And that's even worse. After all, you're the king, aren't you? Well, I need the chieftains to come here.
Also,
because
dialogue choices that represent the same choice 3 different times.
right.
Just
And?
no. Why?
Three pillars, you see. I think, I would say it would be, I'm not sure. Endless screams of agony. You're asking about ingredients, right? Well, I imagine there's definitely the brains of some beast in there, you know? Oh, and it would be great to add a strange toe. I haven't had one of those in ages. We'll need some fat, too. Can't get the creamy texture I'm thinking of without... And milk. Did you see any cows here in the Forlorn Swords? I guess so. Well, in fact, I don't have, any of those in... Are you serious? Well, I'll be damned. Thank you. So, I'll be waiting.
So I don't know how to describe questing, its story implications, and how systems tie into the overall player experience, other than it's worse than the first 2 acts, entirely unsatisfying and devoid of what makes the game interesting. Questing is the main draw of the game, I'd argue, yet it takes a backseat here too, unfortunately. As I've noted, 4 tribes, 4 areas for side quests, which would take up the majority of your time here, and these feel divided for the sake of the developer's convenience in pushing something out. So I hate to use the word cookie cutter here, but not as a pejorative or to be demeaning to the developers, yet that's really what is designed here as. So let me describe how you engage with the tribe step by step to give you an idea what's going on. The whole premise of the Forlorn Swords is after meeting Gerfiner, one of the last of the Gunvolter tribe, he requests you to gather the tribes for a move, or an invitation for the tribes to unite to make lasting political decisions, in this case, to fight Camelot together. My initial problem is that when you first meet him, he somehow knows you're the king's vessel. It isn't the fact that he knows this that I have a problem with, but if you pick the how do you know option, he just doesn't tell you. The dialogue continues as if you selected the other option. Also, most importantly, I think the developers missed the point. He doesn't really explain why he, or specifically the Del Rita, should want to wage war against Camelot. Assuming he knows that you're the king, or at least his vessel at least, he must have an understanding of how Arthur comes back, yet refuses to tell you this point as he thinks you'd know. The only person who doesn't know is the player, and the conjoined yet not complete Arthur, who is this blank slate that exhibits the classic gamification trope of having everything explained for him. That's fine in itself. I think the real reason is that if the developers explained King Arthur's regret about why the Del Rita were situated here, they wouldn't have a good post-memory dialogue to specify to you about his regret over their treatment given their pivotal significance to Camelot's wars. In doing so, the player wouldn't have the opportunity to decide the fate of the giants, as Arthur is too overcome with emotion over the reward of exile to make the choice himself, and allows you to do so instead.
Glorious past, but it has no future. There is no way to save it. The giants sided with our enemy. We had to find a way to remove them from the equation. So, under cover of night, the tribes stole their children. I told the giants their offspring were our hostages, and that we would slaughter them if they refused to bend the knee. One of the most humiliating moments of that whole war, both for me and for the Del Rita.
Well, anyhow, Griff Hunter rambles for quite some time with lore exposition of the tribes, so we gotta go help them. The first I experience is the Volker tribe, the berserker meatheads whose whole idea is that the goddess Baether gives them strength by special potions shrouded in mystery. As a sole female figure, the matron is responsible for the production, and such religious matters bind them, both physically and in secrecy, to a seclusive temple. Oh, and not many berserkers are left, as many have joined up with One Eye in the Horns of the South. The player goes from speaking to Angsvar, the leader of the tribe, and asking what's wrong, why can't he join us for the moot, as the union of the tribes is necessary for story-contrived reasons to be able to receive the fragment, and he says he can't trust outsiders. He tells us if we want to help, then get rid of the bandits fortifying the Volker Stronghold Mountain. Other than this guy with the unique weapons, and the cardboard armored summoner boss, the fights are pretty okay. Return back. Then he informs you the matron is missing, therefore stunting the political sway and overall capabilities the Volker are known for. The lack of potion production means shame and a lack of standing that stops him. He doesn't know her whereabouts, however, so you need to head over to Berde, one of the few outsiders we'll meet, located really close by.
It's pointless. Mother made her judgment, but if you're set on trying anyway, speak with Brede. He'll know more than I do.
Berde provides you a weirdness oral drugs finder. Note that there aren't any psychedelic effects or interesting side effects to make it interesting. Simply press it in your inventory to reveal the map-associated cave location. Traveling there, the then 2-minute excursion features a bottomless, a Strawfire look-alike enemy to defeat, to then obtain evidence of her passing and the sacred matron Podum. Upon returning, you can optionally speak to Berde first for the more interesting option of figuring out how these potions are made to then fight a Fordweller. The same exact kind of Fordweller you fight in the endgame area dungeon, and the same Stalker Fordweller featured in nighttime gameplay, just heavily nerfed. If you do or not, you go back to Angsvar, to which you tell him the matron is gone, and now you are responsible for figuring out what happened to Elpset, the upcoming matron, as they still need a new matron. Go to the convenient house that's also close by, it's like less than 50 steps, to figure out why she flung herself off a cliff via letter.
You brought back the matron's totem. We hoped it would stay lost forever.
Then go back to Angsvar and tell him why, which the player learns how the potion practice itself is as if the matron herself is consuming the potion, but worse, as she becomes more mentally unstable than a berserker's typical ingestion, on top of seclusion and a lack of support.
It only ends in death. When a matron undergoes initiation, it's said she becomes a living vessel, from Mather's wrath. It's like drinking that cursed potion. Your veins burn and your mind screams for blood. Our matrons spend their days isolated.
You may choose between a new matron choice or inform him instead of the true nature of the potion to stop the ritualistic behavior that involves 4-dweller blood juice concentrate and not the wholesome nature of the benevolent goddess. I convinced some of the latter with Brede's less poisonous potions as an alternative, and he agrees to the move.
We always will be. We've relied on the potion for too long, but we can fight without it. We should have enough rage of our own to carry us through. At least against Camelot. If we're doomed, so be it. At least we'll fall on our terms.
I know it sounds reductive by staying out like this, but this is exactly how it's planned and served as the basis of go here, and then go there with maybe a fight in between, and here's another choice. The problem is that it's structured like the inverse of the common trope of show don't tell to tell don't show, where you've already missed all the juicy bits of showing. I think a fair comparison would be something like the Dark Souls series or Elden Ring, in which you're already playing in a world that already had important and far-reaching effects that already occurred far before your coming. Unlike those games, however, what is implied in Avalon concerning the weirdness rarely shows itself as effectively or directly, especially in Act 3 where we're constantly reminded of the doom the encroaching weirdness will bring. Furthermore, outside of cutscenes, I don't think I can come up with many direct examples of NPCs actually interacting with each other, as I realized this just now after finishing the game. NPCs are mostly scripted in relation to the player in a rather passive or basic way, and the best way to see this is in Connacht where you expect hustle and bustle. NPCs walk around at best, and the only example I can think of is a tavern in Act 1 featuring the gossipers and some drunken banter amongst two NPCs. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it working again post-game as the NPC wasn't properly initiated in the seat, but it was amusing to hear the Theseus' ship argument about breaking and reforging the unstuck hearts of the Sword in the Stone, so yeah. If the world doesn't feel lived in, it won't here either, with immersion being at an all-time low that fails to mask the obvious elements found in many other games. But that's even more so disconnected here in Act 3. All the events are so insular essentially that it's completely removed from interesting things about the weirdness and overarching matters of the plot that really just demonstrates a lack of intrigue that makes the game previously so enjoyable. Yes, there is lore about the weirdness and how these tribes interact with it, but that's already given with events and quests in Acts 1 and 2, now it's just worse. Also, the fact that One Eye is mentioned here is cool, and how the potion is weirdness concentrate, but this is not demonstrated by anyone and doesn't show any negative symptoms upon One Eye and his berserkers. The lack of consistency to earlier choices in the game when he is attempting to rouse soldiers to fight against odds, when there's a chance they physically won't be able to, extraordinarily crushing to their pride therefore, that isn't explored. None of this is alluded back in Act 1 and is only now relevant here to give the player a choice between stopping the tradition or not, as the dubious origins of the potion and its practices are relevant only right now to force a choice upon the player. If you heard Elspeth scream or something after finding the matron, or if she suddenly walked up to you in hysteria, it would have been much better. Or if there were more context clues in the shrine itself that demonstrate the previous matron's struggles in living a secluded awful life, it might have influenced your choices more with narratively rich deductions to determine your choice. Additional or secondary elements for storytelling immersion are rather rare for the game outside of notes and written documents, which the letter here I believe is the only source of such in Act 3, which is a bummer given that this is the sort of game that operates similarly to Elder Scrolls Sandbox tools to create scenes. But let's continue.
Not one, but two.
The next tribe I visited was the Zen tribe. So their situation is the differences between two social political groups in the tribe have led the more hot-headed ones to summon their god, the Stagfather, to maintain the Zen's old ways to ensure the tribe are met with enough game to hunt. Unfortunately for them, their primordial god isn't immune to the weirdness and goes on with indiscriminate brutalization, or the opposite of the symbolism respecting the creature in the hunt, upon the attendees. The ones unaware or non-conforming to the old traditions, i.e. mainly those left in the village, have to deal with the after effects, so even more deaths upon their tribe. So you wander about when you get there and you're told vague things about the tribe being recently wiped out, as none of the NPCs will give you a full explanation of their newfound grief. Also, for a wiped out village, the amount of populated homes relative to its supposed emptiness is contextually at odds. So you approach Barlam the chief and ask why he can't go to the moon. You'll quickly understand how tedious this becomes, so he doesn't trust you, you being the outsider you are. You are then directed to Kel and asked to find a missing hunter to vouch whether you are trustworthy or not. Yup, it's side quest time. So you enter the straightest beeline of a cave I've ever seen and fight yet another bottomless, just like with the Volker. So she lied, and defeating it impresses her enough to vouch for you. Great. Now you can return to Barlam to lord dump on you, and now he needs you to clean up after the volatile stagfather god, sealed in Gudri's body.
Well, that's a good question. Because I have no idea. All I know is that we need to find a way to get rid of the stagfather once and for all. Gudri won't be able to hold on much longer. And when he gives up, we're all lost. Go find Glerna. She must know something.
So we speak to Glerna, the olden shamaness, who directs us to the ritual sites to destroy the shrines to retrieve an item to potentially release the stagfather of his fury.
One soul, three fall. The fourth shrine, hidden and forgotten, will reveal itself.
The first one has an ice golem protecting it. It's a bottomless with a different name. Same AoE attack even. The second one has, well, yet another one, but this one has no name for some reason. It has a glow just like the cave one. Yet another strawfather though. And the third one, a fire golem. But I'll give this one a pass. It thematically implies, well, fire or sacrifice of some kind, given the rare actual environmental context stuff, but that's just still a strawfather, of course. Now you obtain the quest item and head back from their backyard. It's like less than 300 steps. Now with that done, you're given a dialogue choice of whether you want to save or delete the god. I chose the latter. So you can fight the largest stagfather, and he summons the same trio you already defeated. Even the one with the lack of the name. 4 strawfathers.
Well, Mr. Funny Man, is this how you get your sick kicks?
Choosing to end the stag fodder earns you the ear of the shamaness and the thanks of Barlam. Suck it, Granny. For a reason is strange given that the stag fodder isn't immune to the weirdness, as Barlam gives a compelling argument of not requiring the assistance of gods to achieve the life he wants. I kept it consistent with my choice of the Vulkar.
We, their descendants, are the ones left to deal with it. If they'd known what would happen, I'm sure they'd have left him back in the homelands.
Alright, the third tribe I encountered are the Ophir. Known for their smithing, are the most well-developed of tribes and likely developed with the most effort in mind. They are likely given the most priority to 4 tribes scenario, I'd say, yet length doesn't automatically make it better, it's also lackluster in its own ways. So their issue is that the tribe's leader, Durgiv, refuses to give up his seat of power as he represents the definition of a tyrant. To rule via power, but in this case being unnatural power. I kinda checked out at this point, given the lore dumping kinda got to me at this point, but from what I understood is that he coveted the power of the giants somehow, which is associated with the pillar or whatever, which enables him to be immortal, or at least beyond human limits. Nice, I can see where this is going. Great to see a familiar face from the prologue island we escaped from, however. He enables us to explain the player's major decisions, yet he doesn't add much himself unfortunately, so a lost opportunity here as well. So when you get to the stronghold, oh, but wait, I forgot to mention, each and every one of these tribes has this gatesman who will stop you and attempt to interrogate you about what it is that you're doing here. No, they don't tell you your request to the tribe leader, they just stand there to annoy you to some degree while sharing information, especially lore. Let me tell you about this Vulkar tribe fellow though, this guy will play his line no matter what. Be in a menu near him and wait a few seconds, he'll spit his one-liner. Complete the story's quest segment to resolve his tribe's issue. Doesn't matter. Help with the tribe via side quests? Fast travel and come back? Nah, doesn't matter. I was contemplating removing him. Him and Kedrun, one of the quest guides at the entrances of the Forlorn Swords, are the most egregious examples of this. And while Kedrun is finally fixed, I don't believe this guy is, unfortunately.
Watch your step.
Anyhow, after the guard at Ophir's, you're hailed immediately by Egil, Stroner's son, to talk to Stroner, as they are the only ones to look to other tribes for outside help to resolve their issues. Cool divergence, but if I'm forced to help them anyhow, narratively, it doesn't really work given that there's the same steps across the tribes.
Please, go meet him at his forge. You can't miss it.
So you meet him and he tells you the lore of what's up with the Ophir tribe and tells you should probably look to Darvner, the Stone Warden leader, to assess what could be done about the invincible tyrant. More on the Stone Wardens later, as the questline that spans across multiple maps has hyped them up so much, and let me say, it ain't worth it.
He lives in the second largest house in the village. You'll find it easily enough.
Anyhow, you meet the Stone Warden leader and he says that Durgiv can't be beat, unless you earn the blessing of the giants that will enable the player to forge a weapon that can wound him. Unfortunately, he doesn't know where to find the giants, so you need to go back to Stroner downstairs to ask his presumably insane wife if she knows.
Without it, you're as good as dead. I'll help you forge it. But you'll need to gather the giants' blessings first. They hold all the fragments you'll need.
Vigdis? What does she have to do with this? Does that old man really believe her ramblings are the will of the giants? Unbelievable. I won't say what I really think about this. If the Master of the Brotherhood believes it, who am I to argue? Because I'm protecting her from prying eyes and the superstitions of villagers, that's why. I don't know you. Why would I speak of my wife, accused of madness, to a stranger? For any Dalrita, losing one's mind is like a living death, a shame worse than most can bear, but I love her too much to grant her a good death. If Darvan believes she hasn't gone mad, but instead serves as a bridge between the Ulfr and the giants, then I'll gladly let you speak with her. You'll find her in the locked room. Here's the key.
But you're not here for stories, are you? You're here for the blessings.
Well, I spoke too soon, as she soon tells me.
Each giant demands something different. It could be a test of will, a trial of battle, or a riddle no mortal tongue can solve. Start where the land still remembers their steps.
I'll admit this is better than the first two tribes, given that it makes you travel much further than just nearby, and demanding things surely means different objectives, right?
And the earth hums beneath your feet.
So I visited the Summoner, or the giant representing the ill-fated Gunvoter tribe first. And well, the dialogue options you see on the screen will be the same for all three, which is a damn shame. Lots of the generic, I am so old and oh so knowledgeable going on, and prove yourself, with all three of them stating such in somewhat different ways.
And tell me why you stand before the Summoner, but honor alone does not.
This one specifically says,
show me your strength, your will, and the bonds you have forged with others. Only then will I lend you the might of the Summoner.
That actually sounds rather interesting. Do I call upon the spirit replicas of others we met on the way in a spiritual battle to fight together?
Call forth your allies, mortal. The Summoner respects not lone strength, but the bonds that carry us forward. Together, you will face.
Psst, you'll be silent anyway, like the rest of the NPCs after you're done with them story-wise. They literally only exist to propel the story without further characterization. But fighting with allies? That actually sounds really badass. So I was standing there waiting for something to happen. I kinda lost my shit here. So was he talking to the Krokmal that brought his friend? Is it his trial? Oh, okay then, it's supposed to be about my bonds, but somehow me fighting solo demonstrates my bonds. Got it. Probably the single worst thing I've seen.
And fewer still the bonds to overcome. You are worthy of my blessing. Take it, mortal, and carry the strength of the Summoner with you. But know this.
The Summoner warns you of the blessing. Why is it a power now? Binds you to those you fight for. I thought this was a smithing material to craft the blade. None of this is explained in full detail what you're exactly receiving than a blessing. Dialogue, fight, checklist. But yeah, these Krokmals are the exact same things you've fought already, and this cool blue variant can be found on the map, so not exactly unique and once again a lost opportunity. At least the Stag Fodder got his trio of slightly different Straw Fodders. Okay then, so on to the second giant, the Dark Beneath the World. You're maybe like half a meter lower than the entrance of a valley cave opening I entered, and it takes like 15 seconds to travel into. Also, this is a cave like every other cave in this region, taking less than 2 minutes to fully explore. At least the chest is fixed as of the 1.04 patch. Unlucky me, however. So the lack of presentation is hurting the giants so much already. It's also particularly strange to know that all the giants hate Thurgiv. You are so picky-choosy about someone who actually wants to do and is willing to do something to stop him. Really confusing, but okay. Show courage, wit, and sacrifice. And he tells me to bring what lies at the core of your enemies.
Courage, wit, and sacrifice. Bring me what lies at the core of your enemies. The heart and the brains of a beast will prove your courage and cunning. Only then will you earn the blessing of the depths.
It's just a Gloomfraud, which is found in the Alchemist quest chain in Quinacht about a maniac who turns a beggar girl into a dryad. Again, a recycled enemy. Also, he said enemies. This is just one. Anyhow, the congratulations speech immediately starts after defeating it while not offering its innards, so it just plays his lines, I guess.
Its heart and mind laid bare.
More mumble jumble about a vow, binding it to the eternal. This is that ends with the game's endings, by the way, and makes zero sense as it's just a bunch of fluff.
The unyielding, the eternal, the unseen. Go now, and tread carefully. The depths remember all who walk them.
So, one more giant to go. This one's the most interesting as it's located within the village of the last tribe, the Druids. So, nice way to do two things at once, I suppose. This one wants me to understand the value of what grows, what blooms, and even amidst the ash.
Prove you understand the value of what grows, what blooms, even amidst the ash.
And two,
prove that you understand what you fight to protect, and I will grant you the strength you seek.
So, does a blessing now mean a mental spiritual energy, a material to craft a weapon, or actual capabilities or powers? I'm not too interested given what happened with the last two, so surely it's just a battle. And yes indeed, it's a beholder. So beholders are basically larger versions of Marrowgas, the things commonly seen in Connacht and share the same exact laser beam animation attack. This one's just larger. Oh, and there are normal ones too. It appears I fought the normal ones in one of the side quests or stumbled upon them somewhere, so cool. Nothing new at all.
You have shown me your heart, mortal, and it is steady and true. Take this blessing, forged in both bloom and ash, a fragment of what was and what will endure. May it shield you in your darkest moments, and remind you of what you fight to protect. Go with my blessing, child, and let life flourish where you walk.
Alright, now I'm finally ready to fight Thurgiv, I think. So returning to the Stone Wardens, and receiving compliments for my superior skills at doing nothing but murder 3 things in trials, the player can now forge a weapon yourself or let him do it.
It's the pinnacle of the Stone Warden's craft. It's a feat spoken of in tales but never achieved in living memory. You've brought us to the peak of what we can do, and surpassed even that.
I opted myself, figuring it would be something more interesting. But it's a simple fade to black and he helps you anyway, which, no doubt, I can imagine the same thing if you let him do it instead. I'd say this is a serious lost opportunity for something more.
To take lightly. You've earned this moment. A Stone Warden in all but name, shaping the strength of giants. Use it well, and make it count.
So, the weapon to defeat him is a great sword that hits 10 to 20 damage or a range of 29 to 58 with my current skills, while a weapon in this area such as the Sour Plague hits like 68 to 75 or a range of 198 to 218 with my current skills and bonuses. So, it's a functionally useless weapon outside the fight and equivalent to something like a short sword found in the first area of the game. This feels like a ripped off Yorm the Giant Lord Cinder fight from Dark Souls 3, or Rykard the Demigod from Elden Ring, in which both fights have you possess a weapon that has a clear, unique purpose. Except FromSoft actually learned, and the Serpent Hunter weapon is actually really good in Elden Ring. Furthermore, upgrading the Greatsword only boosts the lower range of the damage. But whatever, the fight's gonna be a good one, right? So Schroner said earlier that he grew to a monstrous size. Not really. I fought a giantess on a bridge who could probably beat his ass. So no, he's about the same size as all the tall NPC models that they use, unfortunately. And nothing about him denotes a change in the human enemy AI model that they use for pretty much each and every human. So, for such an intimidating enemy, it only took me about 30 seconds to beat him up. So what I think they've done here is that they haven't actually changed the HP model for the relative amount that you would find for NPCs overall in the region. But now, they artificially made the fight harder by making my damage lower. Try attacking any NPC in this region and they'll have the relatively same amount of health. This can be seen most egregiously from a side quest in which an old woman in the Volker village impersonates the mate there and whispers suggestive advice that drove Tige insane enough to duel someone, i.e. you, to his peril when you stepped into the Volkers. You may choose to clear Tige's name, which you will humbly submit to her own demise.
You in a duel. What is your decision? I see. I don't have anything to live for anyways. Tige was my only joy. Gave my life meaning. It's time to join my children. May Mather watch over our souls.
Firing off an arrow into the back of her head somehow doesn't delete an old lady called Frail, as they seem to put a stock amount of HP for NPCs based on the map. The more you interact with the game therefore, the more the scenes show themselves by itself. No effort required. So if he wasn't able to pop off a heal, this probably would have taken closer to like 20 seconds or less. Safe to say, for such an important part of the story, and in a context of an honorable duel no less against someone who purportedly has supernatural powers, the lack of any difficulty or unique elements is a major letdown. With Durgiv out of the way, the Ulfer tribe can finally pick a new leader and join the moot. So here's the choice decision now. A choice between Darvner or Stronir as the new leader. I chose Stronir as he was really eager and noble in his intentions to get Durgiv off the throne.
You fought bravely, and I have heard your will. Me, the new chieftain. I never sought this, but if that's what the tribe needs, then I'll do my best.
And strangely enough, the developers want you to make this choice too. So for whatever reason, Darvner will also agree that Stronir is the better choice, which is probably one of the most egregious flaws of the game. Why would an open-ended choice, which was set up amongst a precedent in the prior tribes and a major open-ended choices in Acts 1 and 2, suddenly have a clear-cut choice? Why would you ever pick Darvner then? I know I wouldn't if I decided to replay the game.
I'll make sure our tribe is strong and united, and yes, I'll go to the moot. The Ulfar will have their voice. Thank you for everything you did. We surely couldn't have made it without you. It's been a long time since the Ulfar had a reason to stand tall. Thanks to you, we have a reason once more.
Finally, the last of the bunch, the Duid tribe. So none of the other tribes are like these guys, given that they practice strange mystic arts and seem to divert from the macho tough guy philosophies of the rest of the tribes with wisdom and learning. This one's actually the most interesting of all the tribes, given that their seclusion even amongst their own implies a greater understanding or usage of the weirdness. Perhaps unique or powerful spells in which the player can utilize after helping them. Sounds great, right? Unfortunately, none of that. So the Duids decided that the best course of action with the coming weirdness is literally to escape the mortal coil by preparing to fall into the sleep, which means to cast aside their mortal desires, bodies, and existence to enter a realm of permanence, via their convenient giant that is associated with the power over life. The chief here, Yunvi, serves as a guardian over people in this process. Yet, as usual, things don't go to plan. She hints that she questions whether this is the right choice, yet she still wants to help those stuck in between, as once they attempted to enter this paradise, they can't leave. She notes that the Duids in the past have exhausted all possible options in stopping the weirdness. Escapism is their final answer. So for this tribe, there are no people here because they spirited themselves away in a purgatorial state, which seems rather convenient from a game design perspective if you don't have to model any characters. But anyhow, in terms of quest progression, well, clearly I want her to join the moot, because why not? Even in a crumbling world, shouldn't one make a final stand of solidarity amongst at least its own peoples? Yunvi agrees that she would be inclined to join the moot if you help her, as she cannot make a choice first unless those stuck in a purgatorial state are able to enter the dream. No problem here, as you, the player, are special, as different planes of existence and or the weirdness doesn't affect you. I'm not exactly sure how this interdimensional stuff works, but since your purpose is to help those who cannot release their worldly desires, well, you know what time it is. So, because there are 0 NPCs for side quests, the developers thought, what if the side quests themselves were part of the story?
I won't make any decisions about the dreaming until you return with answers. Or the will of the mother.
saddened skull to see you here, for it means we draw ever closer to Sonder. Behold the dreaming, our true home.
So this involves 4 side quests. The first is about a rather unpopular Doid among Doids, whose suspicions about the escapism being a poor choice directly relates to Yinvi. I don't know if this could be completed first, without satisfying requirements for other people, so I left this for last. This is straightforward, however, as it's a simple dialogue convincing her.
No one can go there, especially not Yngvi.
The next is a person who wants you to delete a very horny fellow that slept with her friend, who's a spirit form called a Vilcan in this transitory area, simply a copy-paste weird spawn that you see pretty often in Connacht and or at night. A third quest is from an individual who wants to delete both his SO and his friend, Bodil, who both contacted a white that ensures their spirits cannot enter the dream as they exist as bounded zombies.
I went to the Giant's Barrow. We sought knowledge, a sign that we still walk toward Mother's dream. But what we found instead was ruin.
So Xenia, his lover, is found in the village, while you have to explore a small dungeon to find Bodil, who is the white.
My beloved. Ithrum. My beloved. Ithrum.
I kid you not, it only took me about 5 minutes total there, and I felt as if it was one of the longer caves or mini dungeons. Another quest is from a man who accidentally left his bird caged in the village without a way to free it. Simple as is.
You know, in the waking world.
I then convince Yinvi, which I can then report back to the initial fellow.
Welcome.
Ah, Runa. I suppose that means you simply must tell me whatever it is, just because it is his wish. Whatever he's asked of you, know this. Runa has his own reasons for stirring up trouble. So tell me, what is it this time? Does he now? And he's only just come to this realization. Now that he's in there, and I'm stuck here, let me guess. He wants to switch places. To take the chieftain's seat while there's still a tribe left to lead. An escape? That is what I feared. I never would have thought Runa and I could be of the same mind. Tell me, walker in the weirdness. You do not share our burdens. What would you do in my place? I will. You have my word. You, walker in the weirdness, see things in a way the Thoid cannot. We've always placed our trust in intuition. And if mine tells me there may be truth in Runa's words, perhaps I should heed by it. Thank you for your involvement. My duty as chieftain is to hear the voices of my entire tribe, even those who are not respected, like Runa. You may leave me to my thoughts now.
You shall see my sister, Senja, and mother, whose dreams we have shared, and in whose dreams we long to become one. Do not fear. No harm will come to you in the dreaming. I know that you are
Now with all that out of the way, I can
Indeed.
finally meet with Skull, the giantess responsible for the Deutsch dream.
I have watched your journey, Walker in the Weirdness. I saw how you helped the lost Thoid children face their burdens. The weight that kept them from entering this chamber. For that, you have my gratitude. But I know you have your own.
The giant appreciates what you've done and asks you, well, what's your purpose here? Interestingly, 4 options, but you really should pick the option for the moot as well. Each member you recruit will provide you with an awesome piece of armor. I didn't know this at the time, but might as well have the whole gang together for a moot. So the choice here is obvious for me.
So you have chosen to follow the voice of the tribes and his fading hope. Gerfan, a man who so desperately wished to be a unifier, who carries such a deep thirst for retribution. But Ingvi's place is here, among us. And when her kin entered my chamber, the Thoid Elder's burden was lifted. She has no reason to remain in a world crumbling into ruin. All for the ambitions of one old man. Rebuilding old myths will not undo the inevitable. The past is a graveyard, Walker. If you
Okay, with the giant, you suddenly learn deeper, vague things about Avalon and its fate. Yet this is the only time in the main story, while the other 2 are side quests, that I witnessed Arthur come out of his spiritual form and straight up speak to someone. So it's actually explained earlier that Arthur is too weak to manifest and can only do so in specific conditions. Nowhere does he speak to you other than in memory fragments in this map and relating after the night tombs available in the Forlorn swords. But here's a place that exists between dream and reality. Mind and matter. Sorry. Oh, but he does show himself in the Ulfr stronghold via the final segments in the Stone Warden side quest that doesn't possess a special plane or anything, so very inconsistent exception there.
I speak. Whatever this one demands, grant it. That is the order of the king to whom you swore fealty.
I was wondering how long you would stay silent, letting the human whose body you stole speak for you. You have lasted surprisingly long. I suppose emptiness and oblivion have taught you some humility. Nevertheless, greetings, Arthur. I am glad I have finally dreamt of this moment. When he ordered the giants to sleep, he knew that our children could not dream. Dreaming is something giants grow into with age, having no choice but to obey. We left our children behind in the waking world. Alone, defenseless, condemned to the coldness of death. Quiestra, the child I once held in my arms, never dreamed with me. While I built layer upon layer of my dreaming, she was dying. But I had time. Enough time to dream of Sonder. A place and a state where death holds no power. There, I will dream, Quiestra. I will give shelter to the entire Thoid tribe, including Ingavi. I will not abandon any more children to the waking world.
I have made many terrible mistakes during my reign, but I always considered what was best for my people. At least, that was my intention. I wanted to make Avalon our home, free from the plague, free from forces that would seek to oppose us. I thought that my return would restore balance, that I could prevent Avalon's fall.
Your idea of what is good is twisted, human king. As for you, mortal, yes, you need the blessing of the tribes to claim the crown. Those were the terms of the sacred pact, but you will have to manage without the Thoid. They will all come with me into Sonder. I will care for them as if they were my own children. And I will save them from this world's corruption. Indeed, you have the right to make such a demand. The role you played in the fate of the Thoid grants you that authority, and Ingavi, she will accept the path laid before her without protest. Perhaps it is only fair that the last of her people remains awake. That some trace of the beautiful children of Thoid may endure until the end of time. Very well. So be it. The way to Sonder is closed to Elder Ingavi. Her duty now is to carry the legacy, tribe, walker. Although you carry fragments of the king's soul within you, the choices are yours to make. I entrust you with the blessing of my rune, hoping you will choose wisely. And you, Arthur, do not think you still command everything. You are a prisoner of your own legacy. It is done. Our long-dreamt-of meeting has come to an end, and I am pleased with the outcome. Leave now, and let us dream.
Congratulations, that's 95% of the story. Game design, integration, and the story-wise, the idea of the weirdness complications in Act 3 only exists as a means to provide implied problems that conveniently fit simplistic gameplay quest designs that doesn't reach much further, be it narratively or gameplay-wise, than the actual need to do them. 3/4 of the scenario content, which include the Volkers, Vine, and Doid tribes, conveniently don't have many NPCs for story reasons that seem almost like excuse for the developers to sidestep putting NPCs in Act 3 overall, and the same type of decision seems to apply to multiple elements and player expectations, such as for the story choices, environmental design, and so on were regressively overwritten compared to the first two acts in a way that affirmed this area is lacking, and especially for reducing the scope of the game that they're originally going for. The result of this is the 4 tribes approach, in which you are mainly an errand runner, and it's often the case with these quests that their requirements are situated closely to their tribe, so there isn't much exploration in discovering potential new and interesting quests. There are a few situated in or around the tribes, but these similarly lack depth or interest. The tribe quests I call backyard questing, as most are located extraordinarily close to the tribe and serve only as a back and forth for the player. Ultimately then, I think the problem is that the limitations of the immediate game design, especially the issues in producing it, dictates the story and not the other way around. Amazing effort for a smaller developer team attempting an open world game, but it feels like they had to downscale their ambitions 2/3 into the project. So I didn't talk about the trial itself to gain access to Arthur's crown fragment and the decision about how to deploy the giants. Well, because there isn't much to talk about there. The same few and easy repeated enemies, and probably the longest dungeons, but again, short as all of them are short in Act 3. Again, if they spilled the beans on the Del Rita's involvements in the war and how an exile into wintry hardship was their only reward, there would be nothing to talk about afterwards. I don't particularly feel anything differently about them at this point compared to when I entered the region, whether it's from the lack of characterization among the story-crafted small cast of characters, the lack of dialogue to know them better after their purpose in the main quest, and generally, they don't do a good job at displaying what makes them different. Yeah, they do different things, but like I mentioned before, do you actually see them doing said things? No, not at all. For story reasons, they are too preoccupied, presumably, with their issues without the demonstration of such. Weirdness in the direct storyline only really serves as the background flavoring the what had happened, and not the why should I care. And it applies especially to the Del Rita, who have been a seemingly minority bunch of outsiders unfairly abused by Avalon natives and Camelosians. In a way, and in my opinion of course, the intrinsic design of the questline kind of reinforces what most people in this story think about in terms of the biases and unfavorable nature of these peoples. They don't care about others, save themselves given the failure of Alliance after the Gunvolder annihilation incident, and only you, the player, are in any position to help them, otherwise they are incapable of doing anything themselves. That takes away from how they're characterized. In my case, One Eye's position as an alliance with the South serves only as a meager description as its own thing, as it has no impact on how they would act, other than some short musings that fit their biases. Your decisions prior to this point don't impact the story in a grand or interesting way that would have shifted how they would act or respond. You'd think an alliance with others besides yourself would be at least rousing enough to form alliances between tribes at least, or something given their collective hatred, dare say grudge of Camelot, but One Eye's position is explained as a nobody by the tribes with too few under him to make a difference, so why don't they do something of their own? The irony is almost palpable, so this begs the question then, are the choices you make truly that significant in the game? What's the point of the choices you made? Well, that was rhetoric, but you do get a small message of what happens to characters and organizations at the ending. So why aren't things done during your stay? Camelot there is a lot like the legends are to us in real life. They simply remain a legend then, as the most we'll see them are legionaries in Connacht and the current Galahad and his forces in the south. The rest of the Round Table? Nah, not in the game. Wherever is Merlin, or how has he kept his legacy and motivations throughout time? Surely he must have. It sucks because the only way you'd ever likely know more is with a DLC or expansion to the game. So all in all, in the story you are slowly unraveled to the conditions of Avalon, and in Acts 1 and 2, there is a serious sense of intrigue and hopeful payoff, or satisfaction from grasping the threads of the story as you explore more, and more things are slowly teased out to you. However, Act 3 simply does not expand the story, and sticks to one point you learn at the end of the fragment. The ending you choose, which has problems in itself, is just a finale that sums up your choices for a dialogue ending, without actually presenting you the weight of your differences in the actual gameplay as you play through it. Choice without choice therefore, or at least meaningless choices.